Welcome. This is the Cisco CCNA ENSA, also known as the Enterprise Networking Security and Automation course. This course focuses on the CCNA version 7 curriculum. This is course 3 of 3. Threat actor tools. In our course shell, there is a video covering types of attacks and pin tools. Common attack tools that we're using to exploit a vulnerability. The attacker has to have the technique or the tool or the experience to do certain things. There is a specific process like reconnaissance or network scanning. If we're talking password cracking, they're going to have password cracking tools. If they're doing wireless hacking, they'll have wireless hacking tools, and so forth. Alright, so let's look at some of those tools. Password cracking tools, these are tools for cracking passwords, like John the Ripper, or Lothcrack, or THC, Hydra, Rainbow Cracks, things like that. They will use an algorithm to try to crack a password, repeatedly guessing at the password. There are also rainbow tables that are looking up the hashes of passwords. That way we can identify the password via its hash instead. We also have wireless tools. That's going to be AirCrack, NG. There's also Kesmet or other versions, but realistically AirCrack is probably the most common wireless hacking tool. Network scanning and hacking tools, that's going to be Nmap. By far, Nmap's the big one. Packet crafting tool is like Netcat, Nping, Packet, Scapy, Hping. All of these are crafting tools for our packets. There's also sniffers out there like Wireshark, TCP dump, or Fiddler, and more. Other pin tools are like rootkit detectors. That's going to be things like AID or NetFilter. For our fuzzing and our search vulnerabilities, some of these are really old. So like Skipfish, Wapiti, and our W3AF. Again, these are fairly older tools. They are still used for searching for vulnerabilities. They're just not the most current. Forensics tools could be Maltego, Incase, SleuthKit. In reality, SleuthKit is going to be Autopsy, or FTK Access, or Access FTK, or Paladin. Those are all pretty common forensics tools. Debuggers are going to be like WinDB or IDA Pro. IDA Pro is going to be one of the big ones because IDA Pro is also used for malware analysis. Hacking OSs are going to be things like Kali or Blackbox or Parrot. Encryption tools are going to be like OpenSSH, OpenSSL, OpenVPN, which is not really an encryption tool, it's more of a VPN application, but VeriSite, CipherShred, all their encryption-based tools. Vulnerability exploitation type tools, Social Engineering Toolkit, SQLmap, those are the big two. Metasploit is probably the largest, and that's going to be the toolkit for exploiting vulnerabilities. Vulnerability scanners are going to be things like Nessus, but that's expensive. So a lot of people try the open source version, which will be OpenBoss. But if you've ever played with OpenBoss, you realize how complicated it is and how much time it takes to set up, and that just becomes a much larger headache. So now that we've talked about tools, let's talk about attack types. We have numerous types of attacks, and this is just a small sliver of them. Sniffer attacks, that's where we're sniffing applications or devices to capture data. We have a compromised key attack. That's going to be looking at and targeting access based off of a cryptography key. Man in the middle, that's going to occur when the threat actor has a ability to position themselves between a source and destination and capture traffic between both source and destination. A denial of service attack, or a distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS, is a type of an attack where you consume resources of a target system. Pinging, 1 or 2, not a big deal. You get 1,000 people to ping a target, that will start consuming resources. Now, amplify that by 2 or 3 or 4. Now you have tens of thousands of people targeting a victim. That's a denial of service attack. Password-based attacks are looking at valid user accounts and trying to capture or break their passwords. We have spoofing attacks and data modification attacks. All of these are different types of attacks to do something. Construct a invalid packet, or maybe construct a packet to jump VLANs, or eavesdrop or listen or spoof traffic. The big thing is all of this funnels into malicious code or malware. So keep in mind that when we're talking malware, we are talking a high-level overview. We're not getting nitty-gritty into malware. That way, expectations are kind of kept realistic. When we understand vulnerabilities, we understand how to target those vulnerabilities, we need to understand the different types of malicious code that can be used to access devices. Sometimes a web browser can be the malicious code. That just means how we're using our technology to target our victims. And what I mean by that is sometimes a web browser, or even a Gmail account, for example, could be the tool the attacker uses to target a machine, or to use a command and control server through a Gmail account, or things like that. The normal vulnerabilities for end users are viruses, worms, trojans, and things like that. Those are the big ones. However, ransomware and otherware, scareware, bloatware, are also very common as well. But those are specialty and kind of outside the scope of our class. Viruses and Trojan horses are probably the most common type of malware. Viruses. They can alter, corrupt, delete, do whatever they're programmed to do. Could cause booting issues or corruption issues. Could capture insensitive information. Could capture keystrokes. It could be a charging cable for your phone, depending on the cable that you have. OMG cables are out now, so definitely could be that. They can access and use email accounts, and they can spread themselves. They can lay dormant until a CNC or command and control server says activate and do this. Some common viruses are things like a firmware virus or a boot sector virus. These are things that will hide in the boot sector or the firmware. There's macro viruses that hide in the macro features of like Office, for example. There are script viruses, there are program viruses, and they hide themselves in executables, or they kind of embed themselves in other applications to wait for the main application to run before the malicious code is then ran. Alright, so now that we talked about viruses, let's talk about Trojans, because just like viruses, there's tons of different types of Trojans. There's FTP Trojans, there's proxy Trojans, there are destructive Trojans, there are banking Trojans, there are remote access Trojans. That's probably the most common type of Trojan. But again, this is just a very small list of a big list of Trojans. We have malware types: adware, ransomware, rootkit, spyware. We have bloatware, we have scareware, we have worms, and more. Again, this is not a complete list at all. This is a small little segment of the type of malware that's actually out there. The amount of malware out there is just growing. By far, probably the more realistic, scary ones are going to be ransomware, rootkits, and worms. Ransomware by far is growing because it yields money. They're seeing an increase of ransomware attacks because, again, it's easy. and it yields money. And that is it for this module. If you got any questions or concerns, please reach out. Thank you.